Hi, this is Roger. Thanks for dropping by. Where have all the orchids gone? It's that time of year when everything goes back out in the grow room. The only thing that stays in here is my Streptocarpus, which has just come back into bloom and is chucking out new leaves all over the place. So it obviously likes its position, you know, sort of light-wise and things like that. Probably have to think about repotting that one day. Or dump it and buy another one. Harsh, but the camera just doesn't show the depth of colour on these things, and it is a lovely plant. It's actually done well. It's got some tatty ends to the biggest leaves. I'm hoping that the new leaves don't grow as big as that, because then it will look a tidier plant and I can take these big ones off. But they got damaged on the top of the rack they were on, so the tips of the leaves were touching the grill and didn't do them a lot of good. But the two big leaves are the oldest ones, so you know, they can, once these leaves have established themselves and got to whatever full size they're going to get to, those two oldest ones can come off and tidy the plant up a bit. Because I don't get this for the plant, obviously, I got it for the blooms. Anyway, the shelves that were in there are now out here, and there's a bonus. I've actually gained a shelf. So the big bulbophyllum up there, the community pot full, was actually on the floor. But there aren't, most bulbophyllums are intermediate into the warm section. There are a few that grow cooler, but I'm just averaging at the end of the day. I mean, that's a hybrid, that's Elizabeth Ann Buckleberry. And they probably do better if they're kept a bit warmer, so mine should start growing a bit better now the nighttime temperatures aren't going to get as low. I've put all my Paphiopedilums there on the grounds that yeah, you read the books and it says, ooh, keep them shaded. Cobblers. Shaded in the UK is more like dark, quite honestly, and looking at the way Ed grows his, they get good light. I won't say they get like sunshine on them or anything extreme like that, but they get good light. So they're going on the top shelf, and the Phalaenopsis, which are probably my least favourite plants that I own, they just are, I can't help it. They've gone down here, so they're still going to get quite good light, but they will get a little bit more shade than the others. This is looking good at the moment. There's a third bud to come. This is the Phalaenopsis Sweet Memory. And I must admit, my memory, unlike the plant, says that the non-pinky bits were more yellow last time. I mean, that is branches off of the original spike, but nonetheless, that doesn't look as yellowy as I thought. So as a consequence, it's gone a little bit more out of favour than it was before. It's not the colours I remember. But yeah, as a consequence of, I mean, there is a third shelf for this, but it's non-usable anymore. If I need a place for my long cane Dendrobiums to hang, and quite honestly, that gap there is the only sensible place where they can droop down, and every time I take them off their hooks to water them, I don't knock things over. If I had that top shelf in here, whatever was on it would keep getting knocked over. And then language has to occur and stuff like that, and we can do without all that. So anyway, I've got shuffling to do because I've got some tall plants with no home at the moment. There's that stupid great bulbophyllum Phalaenopsis at the back, still with one bulb and a single leaf and quite a lot of roots, but no new growth. So that's going to go anyway. My Epidendrum's a tall plant, obviously, and my Cymbidium, while it remains in here, and there's no way I can put that outside yet, because it's over the winter it's acclimatized to being in here, so its nighttime low, you know, has only ever been 13.5 degrees. Well, if I put that outside now and we get down, you know, heading down towards freezing, that's going to be a bit of a shock to the system, so I need to wait a bit before I can get that outside. No sign of new growths on it yet. But yeah, so as I'm doing a bit of watering today, I don't think there's any pots to water today there, because we've had such dull, miserable weather over the last week. Plants that should have come round to needing watering today are still damp. They're not using the moisture up because I haven't had the daytime temperatures. I've got the day lengths now. I mean, we've just clicked over the 13 hours, but the quality of the light's still rubbish. Maybe the sun will come out today, 'cause that brightens it up a bit, and me. But yeah, so I've got mounts to water today. That's about it, really. What did I want to show you? Oh yeah, this is opening now, and my memory really does not remember these blooms being that big. This is this Hamilton ARRA, which I'd never heard of, but I got it in bloom because I liked the colour, you know, me and my yellows, oranges, and my very thin on the ground reds, but I'm working on that. But yeah, it's an attractive bloom. And when the rest of that spray opens up, that's going to look really nice. And the other thing that's just opening, but I'll film it properly when it does, is my, well, what was Odontoglossum crispum. So that'll be the first time I've seen those blooms. And they are very attractive, in a subtle way, but very attractive. Shape, colour, tinges, everything. But I'll wait till that opens up a bit better because I can't really get at it at the moment. I've got stuff all over the place. But yeah, I've got an added bonus because, as you know, some of my Phalaenopsis got mounted. Well, they now have a place to be that's not really in the way of anything. And because they're on the edge of that shelf, I must get that dead leaf off. Well, let's put it this way. I wish it would fall off. But I've now got some extra hanging places where actually that's going to be a bit dark there because it curls over. What about there? Yeah, that's better. Yeah, so I've got a few little hanging places that I didn't have before. So we'll see how we go. I've got a problem here with this flipping great Psychopsis. That's the big plant in the pot of moss. When I did that, it had no roots, and I still don't see any roots coming out to the edge of the pot yet. This one was failing miserably. This is the Alba, but it now has a pot full of roots. The growth that it pushed up late last year, that's a miserable failure, quite honestly, but at the time it grew that growth, it had no roots. It now has roots, so the next new growth hopefully will push on nicely. But the big plant, the spike, is taller than the shelf, and it's just aborted its last bud. And I think that's just the dry air in the house. You know, these are high humidity lovers. They like their humidity. They like their warmth as well, which is why I had to go in the house. But there is just a sign of the next bud. So hopefully I haven't lost the spike, because I've had that spike donkey's years. This spike just went brown and started to die back, so I cut it in the hope it might branch. But the chances of that branching in that dry air are pretty thin on the ground. So that's a long way off blooming now, that Psychopsis. That's probably got to wait for a new growth and a new spike. So probably 2 years plus. Marvellous. But if I'd left them out here, the temperatures I need to get all my resting Dendrobiums right, far too low for Psychopsis, really. So, you know, you have to make choices. Maybe Psychopsis are not the best plants for me to have, you know, simply because of the winter. Out here it's too cold, in the house it's too dry. So, as I say, this rationalisation is geared up to what does well in the conditions they're going to get. Now, the Phalaenopsis going in the house for the winter is no problem at all. They don't mind the lower humidity. The Paphiopedilums are not quite so keen, but they just about hang on through the winter because of the humidity trays. And they'd still prefer not to get that cold. But I need to find out a little bit more about that from somebody who grows lots of them. How cold can you let these things get? Because they would do so much better if they could stay out here in the winter. But if the cold's going to mess them up, then it's a no-go. And if it wasn't for those attractive leaves, those would be my next least favourite plants. I just wait so long for the things to bloom. When they do, they're smashing, but their leaves are their saving grace because they are incredibly attractive. You know, even on my little miniature rescues, Gorgeous leaves. That's their saving grace, otherwise they'd be on their bike, I think. Colour changer, what was it? Oh yes, this Cattleya up here. I'll have to hold the camera over my head, which is a pain today because my back's giving me a bit of trouble. I lifted up one of the big garden pots yesterday because we've had so much rain. I noticed the pot had an inch of water on the top of it, so obviously the drainage was messed up. You know, it was holding water instead of it running out the bottom. So I picked it up and turned it over to, well, I just poked a screwdriver in the drainage hole and wiggled it around a lot, and all the water rushed out, so that's what it needed. But unfortunately I didn't lift it up straight. My fault. But anyway, the difference in the colour between those that have been open a while and the one just opened, it's quite dramatic. So you can get them both in the same shot. You'd think they were separate plants, but they're not. They deepen with age. So that is a really deep orange, and that is a very pale orange. So bonus. Get two types of blooms on the same plant, especially if you get a phased opening, you know, where you get some that have been open quite a while and some new ones to come. You see the two colours at the same time. But attractive little blooms nonetheless. And there was something else. Oh yeah, when I leant right up the back to point out that strange nobly right up in the corner, there was quite a few very, very observant people said, that sea of green that you were complaining hasn't got any spikes, there's a big spike sticking out at the bottom of the shot. Well, I'd forgotten that one. You can just see it through there, possibly. Depends how eagle-eyed you are. But that's my Shelob Tolkien. That's spiking on its one of its many new growths. And quite honestly, I'd forgotten. I put it up there because the spike was only a few inches long. Well, it's now getting going. So I need to get that plant to the front now where I can see it and remember that it's got a spike on it and not bash it around when I pick the plant up. Anyway, so a bit of a change round, moving some shelves, everything back in their growing season quarters, and we'll see how we go from there. But as I said, I've still got to move some plants around because, you know, there's things that are less than a shelf high that are on what I call a tall shelf. This is a tall shelf because this grill is missing. So these plants are like a 2 shelf high, and you can see a lot of the leaves do stick up above that height. But there's a couple lurking in there that don't need to be on that shelf, which might mean I've got room for my epidendrum in there. I'll have to wait and see. So bit of watering, bit of shuffling round, and if I spot anything else as I go, obviously I'll film it. But I really must get on and finish my talk today. I'm at the stage now where I've got the last section to do, and looking at the timeline in the software, I'm coming up to 45 minutes already. So I've now got to go back and take some out. But it was an unknown. I didn't know how long the sections would take. You know, so it's good that I find out beforehand, you know, because at least I can go back and think, well, that was a bit long-winded, I can cut that out, and that'll leave room for the last little bit to get the timing right. And then I'll run through the talk on it and post it, so you can have a critique and pull it to pieces, because I'd prefer that than just say nothing and let it go, and then it end up being not quite as good as it could have been, from some, you know, critical comments. Don't worry about upsetting me, you'll have a job to do that. You find out if you really upset me, because the next time you come to leave a comment you won't be able to. And I've only ever done that to 2 people so far. Well, 2 real people and a scammer, basically. So yeah, I don't do that often. You got a job to upset me. So it's an open world. Leave your comments, they're all appreciated. Good, bad or indifferent, they're all appreciated. So anyway, I'll keep this one quite short because I really need to get on. Oh, everybody seems to be loving this little thing at the moment, you and me both. Again, colour differences. These blooms here and here have just opened. The difference in the colour between an aged bloom and a new bloom. There's an awful lot of orchids do this. They get a depth of colour. Some of them fade and lose their colour and go lighter, but the majority that change colour seem to do that. They start off a lovely colour, and then they get better. I mean, that is a deep yellow. There's loads more to come as well. I wish they all came out at once, but it'll extend the blooming period, because I don't know quite how long these are going to last. But you know, this flush down the bottom were the first ones to open, and now it's heading up the plant slowly but surely, and the last one will be these spikes that have just started over on the far side. So it's going to be in bloom a very long time. But yeah, and this one's been nice to me because the two blooms on this spike faded and dropped just as the next two opened. So that's extended its blooming. That's Dendrobium moniliform, and it's the variegata variety. Lovely variegated leaves. I think that's doing a new growth. Yeah, that's finally decided to push up a new growth. Lodigessii, coming soon. I don't know how soon. First time bloomer, but coming soon. And you know, I haven't even had this plant a year yet, so I'm pleased that the flipping thing's blooming at all. But at least it's having a go. Looks like we got 3, 6, looks like 8 blooms, I think. I don't see any more lurking anywhere. We've got the 3 over here, these 3, and then these 2 up here, which are going to be the first to open, I suspect. So looking forward to that one. And somebody's dying to see the nobly type Comet King actually open its one and only bud, and so am I. It's a lovely colour, but somebody wants to see that because they've got one and it hasn't bloomed yet, so they'd like to see it like for real. Well, as near as for real as you can get. My camera does justice to most colours, but there are some that it just doesn't, and most of those are in the red spectrum. And the worst possible time for me to use my camera for the deep oranges and reds is when the light level is low. The camera really plays games with the colours. And it's even worse at shows and places like that, because you walk into what is in effect quite a dark room and your eyes go whoop and open up nice and wide, and you think it's nice and bright, but it's not. You know, indoors in a hall with electric lights on is not bright light, and cameras object to it, and the cameras with decent software in there not only object to the low light and switch to low light filming, they're clever enough to detect that it's not natural light, it's an artificial light, so they start playing with that, trying to get that right and messing up your colours. Still, at least you get to film something. So I'll leave it at that for today and crack on with shuffling plants around. I'm hoping that literally during this week every plant gets its place where it can just stay unless it blooms, in which case it always comes to the front where I can see them. But apart from that, they have a place where their light's as good as I can get it for that plant. Yeah, and some need higher light, some need lower light. Well, high shelves, low shelves, front of the shelf, back of the shelf, all that sort of stuff. And some need space. Well, often you get a tall plant that takes up a lot of room, and there's room for a plant that doesn't need quite as much light to tuck in underneath the canes or the leaves. And then you've used a bit of shelf space that, you know, perhaps you wouldn't have used otherwise. So I'm always looking at trying to find optimum places. And every time I water, every plant comes off the shelf to be watered and gets left to drain. And I always clear the whole shelf off. And then, you know, when I've done my thing, I put them back. And a lot of the time they go back in exactly the same place. And other times I think, right, you got a spike coming, so we'll move you now while I've got you off the shelf. And that's how things get shuffled around. Nothing is fixed. No tablets of stone jobs here. You know, everything can be moved. I'm seriously thinking about those poor old Deces. Because having just put this shelf in, the top shelf here, as you can see as I move the camera quickly, is a lot brighter than where those Deces are. And those need good light if they're going to bloom well. So it might be that the Paphiopedilums go along that back shelf, because none of them at all, they won't touch the shelf above. And that gives my Deces some brighter light. You can see the difference now as the sun's starting to come out. That light is far brighter than in under there. So I think we'll do that today as well. Get my Deces up in the light. And if they are going to bloom, they're tall bloom spikes as well. So they'll need some height to get those flowers up. So they wouldn't be able to stay where they are anyway. I don't think there's any spikes showing yet, but I haven't looked at them for a while. I just top the trays up with water now and again. Occasionally they get an incredibly low level feed, but they only ever get watered and fed through the tray in the bottom and never pour water in the top. The base of those plants is so susceptible to rot. So they get their water up from the bottom. It's my only orchids that I water that way, but then they are totally different orchids to anything else I've got. Dramatically different. Those things dry out, they die. Give them too much feed, they die. Use naff tap water, they die. So fussy, yes, but not really. I've got RO water. You know, they've all been repotted. They're all in a mix that I was told from somebody who grows a lot of Deces works well, so they're in that. And reliably told by quite a few people, water from the bottom. Don't get them wet. Keep them dry, keep the air moving, and give them good light if you want blooms. Just don't burn them. Do you know, in the wild a lot of Deces grow in full sun, but they're growing in water. You know, a lot of their roots are in the edges of streams and, you know, cliff faces that have water cascading down from the snow that's just melted up the top of the mountain, freezing cold water, but that's what they like. They like to get their feet warm. So anyway, hopefully blooms on those one day, and I really do hope these last. If I can, the next Orchid Society meeting is, it's nearly 2 weeks away, and I just know they're not going to make it. And I don't know anybody else at the 2 Orchid Societies that's got this orchid. So a lot of interest will be generated by turning up with this, with a reasonable blooming. It's not spectacular. Well, it is for me. It's the first time it's ever done it, but it's not. I think we're going to get some kikis too. So anybody who likes the look at this funny shaped canes, does take a while to mature to blooming size, but it is doing kikis again. It did a few of those last year. Last year it did them instead of blooming. Well, it looks like it's doing both this year. Because these 3 canes up here are 2-year-old canes. These are 1-year-old canes. So strictly speaking, these should have bloomed, not these. Now I know its pattern. Now I know what to expect, because it's finally done it. So, yep. See you next time with whatever I come up with. The chances are the next video will be my talk. And like I've said, be aware it's not staying up there. I'll post it, probably leave it there for 3 days to allow comments and replies to replies and all that sort of stuff. Then it's going to get taken down, because it has got a little bit of content that I'm quite happy to present to an Orchid Society meeting, but it might be a little bit iffy to leave it on the internet with worldwide viewing, shall we say. There's a couple of pictures I've used that could be deemed a problem. So if it's not there, it's not a problem. It's going to be up there and short-lived. So that'll be that, and I'll see you next time.